On December 7, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, leaving the country in shock. America had been out of the war in Europe and Asia, but now that Japan had attacked the U.S., America had to fight back. To keep from any extra conflict, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066 that allowed the government to relocate any Japanese, German, or Italian Americans west of the Mississippi River to relocation camps. This was implemented on February 19, 1942.
Made Arkansas, or just America in general, any safer during World War II?
No. It was war hysteria. It was military hysteria, just the way that you see some of the things going on today with Muslim Americans. The government wanted a way to make people feel like they were safer, but in fact, no, they weren't.
The Japanese were given little time to pack up their belongings, and each family could only have 2 bags. Families had to give up jobs and businesses. The Japanese families were sometimes separated onto different trains. After the evacuation order, Father and Mother stayed up late at night to pack. Father had to sell all the stock in the grocery store in a few days in order to rent the store to someone else. I dreaded most leaving our newly built house, especially when I had to leave my new bedroom set my father bought for me, and where I only slept a few weeks. The night before entering the camps, I lay there in my bed thinking that I would not come back until after the war, or maybe not be able to come home at all. I had a lump in my throat, and my eyes became wet. I am wishing and hoping that we could go back to our home and live a happy and normal life again soon. That was Edna Ito's perspective on leaving for the camps.
In Arkansas, so that was really shocking. I was also shocked by how well they dealt with it. They made the best of it, and so when you hear them talking about it in their writings, they don't sound like they're too upset, even though it was a really terrible thing that happened to them. They really tried to make the best of it and focus on the good things that they could. Interesting.
When the Japanese got there, they had small rooms. Some used to be used as little barns. The people made the most of what they had, though. The internees were not allowed to leave these camps. Internees that did try to escape were most likely killed. Guards were set up at the camp to make sure no one would escape. There was a thick barbed wire fence surrounding the camp, reminding them that the Japanese were no longer free. Even though the Japanese were interned, the people treated life like it was normal. Some people would make rock gardens, children would be educated, parents would work. Other activities in the camps were having plays performed by the kids at the camp, sports. They mainly played baseball, and at one of the camps they had 80 teams. They had school dances and dates. As it doesn't seem that bad, the white cooks would often mess up Japanese cooking and put sweets and rice together. Here's George Takei's view on the camps.
My father told me that we were going on a long vacation to a place called Arkansas. That sounded exotic to me. We were put on a train with other Japanese Americans, and it was a grueling, long trip. We passed tall guard towers with armed soldiers staring down at us. Beyond the fence, we could see internees who had arrived earlier, lined up and waving forlornly. My father became the manager for Block 6 to represent our group with the camp administration and to settle disputes among internees. He was well suited to this role because he was fluent in both Japanese and English. And at 39 years old, he bridged the age gap. The older immigrant Issei and the younger American-born Nisei all trusted him. Many internees didn't know what to do with their time now that they were taken away from their homes and jobs. There were few jobs in the camp, and working outside the camp required special permission. Some internees worked at jobs similar to those they had before the internment. Alan Hagio was an artist in California who worked in the sign shop. Mrs. Sadako Yasui was a home economics teacher who taught sewing for adult education classes. George Baba was a mechanic who worked in the motor pool. Sam Takada and George Yoshihara were butchers before being sent to Rohr. Many internees had been farmers in California, so they grew the food that we all ate.
After the internees were freed from the camps, most went back to California to find their homes damaged and their possessions destroyed. Neighbors helped them get back up on their feet and life went back to normal, but nothing could repay them for the lost years and lost money while they were at the camps. Later, in 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed a law that would give all the surviving internees $20,000 and a formal apology. Racial prejudice still plays a role in the daily lives of many groups of American citizens. After 9/11, it was the Japanese that spoke out against locking up the Muslims. They spoke the loudest because they had experienced it themselves.
It's taught America as a whole something.
No, I don't think that the internment experience taught America as a whole something. I think the internment experience was so forgotten for so many white Americans or non-Japanese Americans that it didn't inform us on how not to do this again. And we see it time and time again, and we see it where the Japanese American community is the first community to stand up and say, no, you cannot do this to Muslim Americans. Right after 9/11, they were the most ardent and vigilant community to say, you cannot start rounding people up. This is wrong. And so I don't think that the camp experience or what happened in the camps informed us and made America a better place.
So far, even though some Americans have fought for it, the U.S. government hasn't repeated the terrible injustices that happened at the internment camps.
And do you think the internment of the Japanese taught America as a whole something?
I'd like to think so, yeah. I know back in 2001, when the Twin Towers were attacked, there was talk of rounding up all Muslim Americans, but we did not do that because we learned our lesson. And you still hear people say things like that. We need to round up a whole group of people, but this shows us that that was wrong. It was not the right thing to do. So I think we're learning from our mistakes.
Though the events of the internment have long gone been forgotten by most, there is still a place where you can learn about it. The Japanese Internment Camp Museum in McGehee, Arkansas has many exhibits where you can learn about the internment. They have art, videos, photos, and more. It's also a short drive away from the remains of Rohr Internment Camp. There you can see Memorial Graveyard, a pet cemetery, audio kiosks, and the awesome smokestack. Jerome also isn't too far, but you won't see much there. I highly encourage that you check out this awesome museum to learn more about the internment.